This is Lou Diamond from Thrive Loud, and you're listening to The Speaking Show with David Newman.
I am here with the amazing Lou Diamond, author of Master the Art of Connecting and host with the most of the Thrive Loud podcast. How are you, buddy?
David, I am spectacular. I get to be on your program and you and I get to talk because that's what this is all about. Because otherwise, if we didn't talk, there wouldn't be any content. It would just be two really good-looking gentlemen on a video cast that no one would be able to understand what they're saying.
That's right. And then the podcast folks would be genuinely confused with like 45 minutes of silence.
They'd be like, exactly, background noise.
So let's start. You and I have these checkered pasts. I'm not going to share mine, but
I was young. I needed the money.
Before becoming the speaker, author, podcast host, leadership guru that you are today, what was your journey that brought you to this adventure? And sort of just paint the path for us real quick in a 2 or 3 minute overview.
I love to say, David, it took a long time for me to figure out my purpose on this planet, which was, or is, to work with the most amazing people and companies and help them thrive through the power of connecting. And I went through a history of people on Wall Street where I worked for a dozen plus years at what is Merrill B of A. Before that, I was in consulting. I was the head of sales for a technology company. And going back to my really early days, I actually worked in a very, very small retail store of my father's growing up where I was told to go to work pretty much every weekend. And throughout all those stages of my life, I have recognized, whether innately or through experience, I've always had the ability to connect with others. And it did not matter whether it was from a business perspective or a personal perspective. I always had this natural outgoing ability, which led me in my career in that path to always have a sales customer-facing view. And it wasn't until probably the apex moment financially in my career that I recognized two very important things. The first was that it only went downhill from where I was in that particular perspective. I was making a lot of money. I was very good at what I did. Excellent. And the other part was I felt like there was so much more I could be doing. I just wasn't exactly sure where or what that was. And through some unique journeys and actually seeking out a business coach, which inspired me to become a coach, that it led me on this path of recognizing that my greatest skill is this ability to help others strengthen what I love to call their connecting core and grow their sales, grow their marketing, grow the way that they lead their businesses. And that has kind of taken a whole long career to get to that point for me to get that whole message together. Was that helpful?
Very much so. Well, I'm going to channel our listeners because I know that when you talk to people, when I talk to people about this concept of connecting and networking, especially because you come out of technology, right? So this next thing I'm going to share with you is even more pervasive. They said, well, Lou, I'm not a people person. I'm not extroverted like you. I'm not charming. I don't have a great personality. I don't tell jokes. I don't think this connecting thing's going to work for me.
It's great that you mentioned this. And what I've learned is that the key, the linchpin of how you connect is not being this showy, outgoing person, is not that natural effervescence of energy that you see people like us who are in front of the camera, in front of the stage, in front of people. The linchpin of how you connect with people is being authentically who you are. And if I am an introverted, quiet programmer type of person that does codes all day long, or I am more of that self-individual writer that likes to be alone and with my thoughts and communicate through paper or other mediums. These are the way that people want to connect with people. It's bringing out that authenticity. I love to say that a lot of those people who have trouble, whether connecting or networking, and I do have a difference between the two, when they do that, David, the ability to have what I call to overcome the fear of being immediately authentic is the awesomeness that you bring out that people are actually drawn to. And yes, so to those that are not the type of people who have that brand of what you think is supposed to be what a salesperson look like or a CEO or a leader or whatnot, that's not true. In fact, if you're able to figure out the ways for you to connect your authentic message, you will connect better than some of the most showiest or salespeople out there. It's who you are that we want to connect to.
I was going through your book, which is a great book, by the way. So if you're listening and you do not yet own a copy of Master the Art of Connecting, drop what you're doing, stop the car, stop the podcast, back up the truck, beep, 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 beep. Get a copy of the book. Hop on Amazon, get busy, stop being a goofball. Master the Art of Connecting. As I was going through the book, Lou, it struck me that a lot of your themes are about, it's not how much you say, it's how much you care. And I don't know if you've used that turn of phrase, but I'm giving it to you as a gift if it's useful. And you have some great stories in the book. The one that really struck me early on is your Compaq story.
Yeah.
When they were being pitched by consulting firm after consulting firm, digital marketing agency after digital marketing agency. Retell that story, because it was totally counterintuitive. And you were even afraid after that meeting that you would get fired.
Yep.
So share with us what went down there.
Single-handedly, people who've known me throughout my career have actually earmarked this particular moment as the moment that I showed what being a master connector is all about. And to your point, it was one of those competitive requests for proposals that came out where 20 companies were sent an RFP. We had done some business at our digital agency at the time. It was called Organic, still around today, by the way, owned by the Omnicom family. And I ran, at this particular point, the New York office's business development, which eventually I became the head of sales for the whole company. And at this particular point, we went from 20 companies, they narrowed it down to 10 to fill out another final proposal. And then they picked 5 companies to go visit in Houston, Texas at their old headquarters, which is now part of HP for those who are listening. This goes back a while. We went down there, and the good news was we were selected to be part of the last 5. The bad news was we were the dead last group to go. We were given 2 hours to present, each group with a little bit of a break in between, I guess, for bio breaks. And our CEO flew in from California. My whole team came in from New York. We had 5 people there in presence. We practiced that afternoon. Some of us flew down the night before. And I took a look into the room moments before we gave our presentation. And I'll let you know that the night before I was uneasy about the presentation, we had 2 hours to present, and we had a whole walkthrough of all of our capabilities. And David, like any smart marketer, if you know your customer really well or know who your client is, there is this ability that I call the power of empathy. And it's the ability to read a room. You know when you walk into a room and something's great, but more often you know when something is just off and wrong. I always equate it back, David, to when I was a kid and I came into the kitchen table, usually where we coalesced in the Diamond family. And if I did something wrong, you can sense it just moving in, a look from your mother or your father. Whether that was something that I had innately or the ability to pick it up, I looked at this room and saw that these 20 some odd people at Compaq Computer were spent, fried, exhausted. And I knew that no message we gave was going to resonate. So I called an audible and I pulled the team together, mind you, with a CEO who has quite an ego and was very glad that he flew in from California to make sure that he would make a presence. So I huddled us together. I go, you're going to have to trust me on this one. We're not going to go with the scheduled plan that we normally do. So they did. They knew I knew the client best and we sat there, but they had no idea what I was going to do. We stood in front of the room and I took the client into consideration and said to them, to those at Compaq, you've had your proposal in front of us. Thank you so much for inviting us. Before we begin, are there any questions that you have ahead of time that you want to address? And of course, there's that one tech guy in the back who asked one question, right? Our technology engineering person who came with us answered the question. And at this point, I said, we want to thank you for inviting us. Our whole firm is behind us. Our CEO flew in from California, and we are here to really get started in working with you. And we know that you are tired and exhausted from hearing our 4 competitors beforehand, and we're not going to waste one more minute of your time. We know that we're the best agency to work with. We'd love to start working today, and we're going to end it right now and leave you with that decision and the proposal that you have in front of us. Thank you. Goodbye. We can't wait to start working with you. We went up and we left. We went into a cab. We headed into the airport. Remember those days of the flip phone Motorola phones? You pulled it up, right, with the antenna. I had one of those in my pocket. And at that point, the BlackBerry had just started coming out. And I was pretty much convinced that the CEO at this point in time was typing that they should fire me on my resignation and saying Lou should be gone. And we're driving there. And the 2 thoughts I had was, one, I thought he was going to fire me. And the second was, I knew that that was the best way to connect with that audience. I felt it. I knew that that was what had to be done. And I went with my gut, and I had some pretty huge cojones. And in our haste of leaving, it turned out that our COO actually forgot something. And who let us know this information was the head of marketing from Compaq, who called me on that flip phone Motorola. I picked it up, answered it, and they said, Lou, it seems that since you ended our meeting early, that one of your colleagues left his bag here. Sure enough, that was what was left behind. Would you like us to mail it back to New York, or do you want to turn around, come here, and pick it up? And while you're here, sign the letter to be our agency of record. Congratulations, you've won the business. I never yelled at a taxi cab driver so quickly in my entire life. I'm like, turn the car around, go, go, go. The CEO's hitting the backspace button on his BlackBerry. Go back, delete, 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 delete. So he's not going to fire me at that point. When we got there, they gave us champagne. And the guy who asked the question, the very technological focused man about the website for Compaq, looked at me and says, would you like to know why we selected you? He said it was one simple sentence. If they were so considerate to see what we were like during this decision-making process and took our cares of how we needed to be, just think how great it's going to be to work with them. The point of this whole story, David, which I'm always mentioned to anyone I speak to or any of my clients, is that the power of empathy to stand in the shoes of your client is one of the muscles of the connecting core. And the ability to recognize how important that is and how much more important that is than your own ego, your own brand, your own website, your own stupid PowerPoint slides that have all the clients that you've ever worked with. None of that means anything. The only thing that matters are those in the customer service business that you are providing a service for and helping. And too often I share this story and everyone says, dude, that was so awesome. I can't believe you did that. I'll let you know that it is, I give a little disclaimer that I do not recommend this in every single situation. However, you have to be keen enough to know your customer, to connect at that level, even before you started working with them, to recognize that that's the way that you are going to be each and every day. So we do care about people, David. We care because we need to care because we are there to help them, not the other way around.
Such a great story, Lou. And I know that in the book, you also talk about the difference, and you just mentioned it again, about connecting versus networking. I think if there is a sales, marketing, business etiquette term that is most misunderstood and misaligned, it is networking. Because we've all gone to those horrible networking events where the bad networkers are there and we feel that we've been networked. And we've been clubbed over the head and business cards shoved in our hands and, elevator speeches thrown at our heads. Walk us through the real differences between connecting the way you teach it and preach it and networking, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
So you and I just were at a conference. I'll use that as the forum of the example where everyone's wearing a name tag or a nameplate over their heads and, it says who they are and where they're at. And I love when you walk around a meeting of these type of networks with lots of other peers and lots of other professionals, that when you say hello to that individual, when you catch their name and you get the glimpse of them and you've learned kind of who they work for, what they do, that is networking. And that is an essential part of every business to really understand and touch and feel the people that are in your industry, in your expertise, in your company, in some cases, in a lot of large organizations for what you do. That is networking, and that is part of getting out there and extending your network and reach. But that I want to distinguish is different from connecting. Connecting is a deep, visceral relationship that you establish from those strong, powerful bonds of relationship that you get from really understanding who that networked contact is. Now, we'll go to a trade show, and I've worked with companies who have sales teams, and they went to a trade show and they come back with 50 business cards. Like it'll look something like this. They'll literally just start dropping down all the cards of the people that they quote unquote connected with. Now, I would actually argue that very rarely do you come back with that stack of cards and you've made all those connections. In fact, if you walked away from a trade show and connected with 3 or 4 people, even just one person, financially or business relationship wise, that could actually be more valuable than any of the cards that you have. And, LinkedIn is also really bad with this. You talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. LinkedIn actually calls your database of network contacts as your connections. And I do not believe those are connections. I have a different vocabulary for that. You have your deep connections and then you have your contacts. And that's how I distinguish them. I'm going to give this one example, David, that I always think of, and you're perfect for this because from a marketing perspective, you're the guru in this area. The difference between a network contact and a connection has to do with how you actually connect with them. So I joke about this, that someone in my LinkedIn set of contacts, they can get, if we're both connections in LinkedIn vocabulary, they could send me an email, maybe even through LinkedIn or an instant chat message there. That might not be the way that I want to be connected with. Those who know me very well know that I'm a little bit old school. I actually like to speak. I like to do video chats. I like to meet in person. And I probably will send people to my personal email for other communications. In many cases, my closest friends will text me. So a really strong connection of mine knows the most effective way to connect with me. They know where I'm going to be most effective, as opposed to that LinkedIn networking dump of death that we all get, which you know is the worst, where you've somehow befriended someone because they had 53 mutual contacts of yours. And now they're in your network. And immediately after establishing a connection, you receive this junk email, junk promo, whether in your email inbox, whatnot, that says, here are the list of services that my company can provide for you. Da, 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 da. I did not ask for this. And to assume that you will tell someone this information, this is a big difference between asking and telling. Your connections, you've asked permission, and they have too, of you and of them, to learn how to best interact with one another. Whereas in that particular case, you're just telling somebody, this is the best way to reach with me. That's where networking gets done, and it's okay. And you can establish your connections through the network. But I'll just stick my hand up until, everybody comes home and starts yelling and screaming that if one other person tells me that they're part of my connected network and they're a strong connection just because they got my business card or saw my name tag at that conference, that is not what connecting is about. Connecting sets up a relationship that really grows at a much amplified level, starting from a network, but it's not synonymous.
Yeah, boy, that asking versus telling, that is so critical. Even, thinking back to when you and I met, right? Here's what was not said. Correct me if I'm wrong. So, Lou, what do you do? So, David, what's your business? We just struck up a conversation. I said, Lou, how do you know Phil? What brings you to this session? What's new and exciting? Oh, you have a podcast. Well, I have a podcast. Would you like to be a guest? Yeah, sure. No, let's do that. And I'll be brutally honest, and I think this is good, but benchmark me on this.
Yeah.
I left that meeting not being 100% clear on what you do because it didn't really matter to me. I left that meeting 1,000% clear. This is a good guy, an interesting guy, and a guy I want to get to know better. Then I got home and talk about voluntary, right? I've spent time on Amazon. So I looked at your book. I spent time on your website. I downloaded I saw some videos. I immersed myself in the world of Lou because I wanted to. Right. Not because you spammed me, not because you shoved your business card in my hand, not because you sent me that long wall of text email saying, hey, David, if you know anyone that needs these things, let me know. And there is something, and you do this, I guess, organically, just naturally, and totally just in your personality, leaving room for curiosity. Yeah. Right? Leaving room for if this guy wants to know more, he knows how to use a browser. He knows how to use LinkedIn. He knows where to get a hold of me. Why? Look here.
There is my business card. Podcast, right? Exactly.
Right? We're doing a podcast. We're doing a podcast palooza, right? Friend of Phil. Beyond that, I was like, good guy. No idea what he really does. Don't really care. I'm curious. I want to get to know him better. So leaving room for curiosity, not doing the spray and pray, not doing the data dump, not doing the wall of text email. Just like in the Compaq story, I think you have to have a higher perception of humanity to do it that way. Yeah. To give people credit for being smart, to give people credit for being a peer and not a prospect. Right? I could easily be a prospect for you. You could easily be a prospect for me if we were goofballs. But that's not how it works. That's not how connection works.
Correct.
Obviously, if you have a personal connection, and I remember it's Harvey Mackay. I'm just ranting on this because you struck such a big nerve with me. Harvey Mackay said, someone asked him once, well, what's the difference between a personal relationship and a business relationship? And I think you would subscribe to his answer. He says there are no business relationships. Every relationship is a personal relationship.
It's not a matter of intentionally leaving people with an uncertainty of who you are and let them find out more. It's also a matter of the situation and the time. Let's call it what it is. I have no idea the first time I meet somebody exactly what their needs are. I have to ask a lot of questions, and I do that in a lot of initial sales meetings. In fact, one of the things that I coach and work with lots of organizations with is we change the way that they message themselves and the way they communicate to a prospect. I joked about this earlier when I said there's the PowerPoint March of Death, which used to be people would go into a room and say, let me tell you all about the things that we do that we have done really great and we've done for other people. Getting back to the most important thing of who really matters, the we, the me, the other people we've done business for has nothing to do with who we're trying to connect with. The only person that matters is that person you're connecting with. So we have to ask them lots of questions. In fact, my initial encounter with whether you or any other people I've worked with is to have a conversation to really understand what it is that you need. What are the things that you need specifically? Because what I do for one organization or what I speak about might be generalized for a lot of groups, but how I make it relevant specifically to another individual is going to be based off of my conversations with that particular end client, end target, end prospect. So to assume any of that of what, hey, let me tell you what I do doesn't work. We need to ask so that we can formulate and say, this is how my message is going to connect with you most. Too often, I'll tell you a quick story and it's in the book. I was hired to go work with a sales organization, and as kind of a scouting mission, I went with the sales team to a pitch. And in that pitch, I witnessed what had to have been the worst presentation in the entire world, because all this company did was tell the prospect what they did. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't specifically even ask what the people in the room did. All they did was talk about how great they were and all the things they did. I equate this to, imagine going to a bar, and if you're single and looking at someone that's a significant other, and you sat down and all you did was talk about me, what I've done, all the me, myself, and I's of everything. First of all, you'd bore the other person to death. And second of all, the other person was like, does this person take any interest in me? No different than, like you said, bringing this back. That is a personal relationship when you're trying to connect with someone individually. When you're trying to actually do a business, you want to personally tap into each of the people in the room, hopefully.
Yeah, well, the brief soundbite that I sometimes share with my audiences, which you have to think about it for a second. A prospect who is listening is not a prospect. A prospect who is talking is a prospect.
Correct.
Right? Prospect who's sitting there getting the data dump, getting the death by PowerPoint, getting the pitch, getting the 17 customer success stories. No. Ask questions, get the prospect talking, because a prospect who's talking is a good prospect.
This great expression, do less, better. I would even say, speak less, say more. In all those expressions, when you're doing less, better, that's really focused on your message and in a communication, really focusing on the core pieces, and you'll do a great job with that. When you speak less, because when you're chatting and talking, you're not listening so much about what needs to be done. But when you listen effectively and then say the things that are most relevant to your target, your prospect, your client. Too often we forget, once we have a client in the door, that they are always still a prospect, your best prospect at that, by the way, for future business. And sometimes we feel that once we've got them in the door, now we could start telling them all our brilliance. No, we still need to be asking all those questions. And it's an important part, Dave. I love the fact when people ask me and say, you're a natural connector, you've got this, you've got all these pieces. I work on these muscles just as much as that person we spoke about earlier, that internal reserve person, because it's not about how showy you are. Working on how you listen and practice listening. I do a phenomenal listening exercise with clients, which is really hard to do. And for people like you and me or a podcast host to be able to not talk and not speak, the best equation, and my grandmother told me this one, you were born with two of these and one of these, use them proportionally. Right. And that will be the best way to start connecting as you listen to your customers.
What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Well, if I remember correctly, also in your book, because you mentioned about language and about how we phrase things, you're a master of this collaborative we language. Not we as in our company, but like me and the prospect, right? We're going to cover some things. I'm going to ask you some questions. We are going to move ahead. We are going to evaluate. It's not even so much about assuming the sale. I think in your case, Lou, it's about assuming the relationship.
Right.
And assuming a collaborative, co-creative relationship. Talk about how some of that collaborative language applies to both leadership and to sales the way that you teach it.
I'll even summarize it a little bit more in the sense that there are probably three areas that I am hired for the most. And interestingly, they make sense. The first one being sales. I'm brought in to help sell and grow a company. So that's one aspect. The other part ends up being with sales, it always bleeds into marketing and messaging. So the marketing and messaging skill have been things that I've had throughout my career. And this latest thing, which is really helping companies thrive, is people recognize they might be getting all the sales in the world, they may have the best messaging, but if they're not working internally within their organizations effectively, then they are not leading and thriving or prospering in the way they need to. What I recognize and what I decoded is that it is not about how you sell, it is not about how you market, and it is not how you lead. The common root to successful performers in each of those pods is how you connect. So the skill in each one of those is first understanding that relationship in the we. We, if I'm the leader of the company, I'm working with my team. It's not just, oh, the senior most people in the organization and these new millennials that are working in the company. No, it's part of our organization. The marketing, it is not our message trying to get to them. It is what is the message of our organization that relates to everybody in their company. I could talk about that in a sec. And how that connects to every potential target we go after. And obviously going back to sales makes the most sense because selling is not just saying this is the product we have. We say, what is the need that we're going to help you? We do not sell in the sales department. We help people buy. We get that from Phil Jones, by the way. He'll ask for that quote later. That's his quote. Anyway, so putting all that together, the we language, and I'm going to give a little credit here to one of my very great friends. I'll put her in that category, if that's such a term. And probably one of the most respected people in the industry, Billy Howard. Billy Howard is the CEO of Branthropology, and she wrote a book called We Commerce. She actually was the first guest on Thrive Loud. And Billy, she really talked about the we economy, that in the shared economy and all this messaging, that if you go back 20, 30 years and go look at advertising or messaging or branding, it was a very me environment. You know, this is why we're the best, why Pepsi is better than Coke, and why this is better than that. She was very specific, but now we're in a world of shared economy. And, you know, when would we have ever thought that we would hire someone to go pick us up and have a shared ride across town? Or even go to a place where you can, instead of renting a hotel room, going in and potentially taking somebody's house and a room within it. You know, no one would have ever thought this economy would be there. When it comes to working with our clients and working with prospects, I always recognize that my greatest skill set is the ability to draw out the magic, the superpowers of the clients that they have, to figure out what that is. And that doesn't come alone. Great coaches need to work together. Coaches don't come up with the answers. Coaches work with the team to pull it out. So the we mentality is the world that we live in today and where growth occurs. And what we all knew this, right? Get a whole team to work together effectively and they can move mountains. We've seen it. When we start acting like a bunch of individuals, it becomes a very uneasy, unmanageable way to work. So I take it at the root. You're very observant in this, David, that I am specifically about getting to we in the very beginning. The language I'll use, it's never about what are you doing even in that message with the client. I say, how can I help you? What are the things that you see the value that I'm going to add with your team? Tell me where the pain points are so we can work together and come up with the solution that works best. Because that's what we want. We want help. Everyone wants help in some other way, right? You and I always joke about it. We have certain teams of people that work for us, and then there's other stuff we have to do by ourselves. It would be great the more help we had. That's the service that great solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, coaches, and consultants are trying to offer.
Now, let's flip this over. We'll do a little inside baseball because I want to talk about how you market your speaking and training. I want to talk about the Thrive Loud podcast and how that's been an asset for you. So from what you've seen and from what you've done, as far as using some of these connecting strategies with conference producers, meeting planners, association executives, the corporate executives that bring you in for the training and coaching that you do, where do you see some mistakes and where can we make some immediate improvements with our speaker prospecting, speaker lead generation?
Great question. And we're all still trying to figure out the answer to that question.
I'm guessing it's not 100 cold calls a day to strangers.
No, it definitely isn't. And we're in a referral business. I think even the way to look at it is we need people to see us, that we need people to see what we're about. It took me a long time, by the way, to realize that whether the speaker bureaus, if you would, or the agents, the people that are helping to market other speakers, as two speakers here on this chat, we are not the clients. We're actually the products on the shelf. where the different offerings or what are out there for their clients who are the meeting planners and those event coordinators that they need. And that's a tough thing to swallow when you're dealing with speakers who have egos and who recognize that they think that their message is going to change the world and their message is going to really connect to whoever the audience might be in whatever area they want to speak with. So to that point, a lot of that marketing and messaging, and I bring this up specifically because we are doing this I'm a member of NSA, as are you. I'm also part of the New York City chapter. We have recognized that too often people have been working individually. Too often people would go to an association and just try to find that one person. If someone knew Phil Jones is a great speaker, they go directly after him. We're trying to group together people that really have common areas or common needs of skill sets and find really great, amazing leaders and associate them together. That's why NSA is such a great organization, because the reality is this. If you spoke at 100 events next year, David, what do you think the odds are that all 100 events that you spoke at are going to ask to have you come back next year?
That would be 0%, Lou.
But it's a good point, right?
Yeah.
There are those instances where people have someone come back and maybe they're doing consulting or they've become a strategic partner. But as it relates to a keynote speaker or an event, what ends up happening is, hey, we had Lou Diamond last year. He was great. Who else can we get to next year? Not often enough, the speaker bureaus and agents are like saying, okay, well, you had Lou. Hey, David would be a great person for you this year. You know what? Jill Schiffelbein is somebody been perfect for you to have over here. Or you could have someone like Tony Chapman or a Phil Jones, any of these folks that speak in different areas with different expertise, because you're trying to provide your whole organization with many different answers. The short answer to this question is marketing yourself and branding yourself is very important. Making sure you're in the associations of other speakers and whatnot, where I guess people know to go to, because I will tell you, there have been a couple of instances where I've recommended somebody else because they said, Lou, you were awesome last year. We're trying to do something different next year. Do you know anybody that speaks about blank? Yes, I do. And I've actually given that back even to bureaus and to agents and to other marketers to try to let them know that I'm a source that not only is there to just help me, but to help the whole community at large. Because hopefully it comes back to you.
Oh my God. Well, what you're talking about, which I totally believe in, is what I informally call your referral posse.
Yep.
Right? So people that are in related but adjacent areas of expertise. So let's say that we're in sales. The sales guy knows a good marketing guy. The marketing guy knows a good social media guy. The social media guy knows a good customer service guy. Those are all interconnected. And so I love that. And, one thing that I think you mentioned about bureaus and agents, and many folks are not ready for that bureau or agent relationship because they're not at the level where the bureaus are interested yet. Every speaker can be a one-man or a one-woman bureau to his or her friends at the level that you're at.
That's right.
So you can be a $3,500 speaker, have 3 or 4 other $3,500 speakers. You can be a $7,500 speaker, have 3 or 4 $7,500 speakers in your pocket, and then they will have you in their pocket to start referring and recommending. And then that really starts to take on a life of its own, where you don't need to do a lot of cold marketing.
Right.
You've got 3 people that are marketing for you. Now you got to get started somewhere. So I guess my next question is, let's say for the newer folks listening, they don't have a referral-based business yet. They have a referral posse, but no one's working in the posse yet, so it's hard to hand leads off. What are some door opening strategies based on connection that you would recommend?
You alluded to this earlier, and this forum that we're in couldn't be more relevant, or is the most relevant. The ability to get your voice out and to get your message out, however that is, in a podcast, in a video chat, in other conferences to go to, is essential. You mentioned Thrive Loud. Now, give a little background. Thrive Loud, we feature those that are thriving in their lives, their businesses, and their passions each and every day. Since I'm all about connecting, what I'm actually doing with Thrive Loud is helping to take some master connectors in their fields and in their line of work and just who they are, and share their message, their journey, their superpowers, if you would, with the listening audience so people can really understand some of these incredible skills of people that, by the way, I'm connected with. Many other master connectors, many impressive speakers have also been on Thrive Loud because they are thriving each and every day. Getting that message out and getting your brand out and then utilizing social media to push it and message it is giving an awareness about your message. I will tell you that I didn't know that I wanted to be a speaker right out of the gate after leaving Wall Street. I knew that I wanted to help companies connect. I didn't know that writing a book, Master the Art of Connecting, was going to be an opening door for me to help get that message out. I didn't know that promoting my book on television and on podcasts was going to be as effective as it was, and recognized that not only did podcasting as a form that I'm very comfortable with, it's also something that I'm really good at. I have a good voice. I have a funny name. I have everything that everyone can recognize with it. And it became a platform for how I can message and brand myself. I say this to all the listeners that are thinking about getting started. These are great avenues that you should be pursuing if you are a thought leader, if you have a message, if you've written a book or you're thinking about writing a book. These are all tools that are part of your tool belt. And they're ways to get your brand and your message out there. My business happens to be coaching and consulting and helping people. I actually call it connecting. And we're trying to come up with that third C, but there's only so many letters you could put on a podcast or on a website. Using all these marketing materials is helpful because it's what I like to say is table stakes. You need to have all this stuff to be in the game so that you can practice your message, that you can practice your art and your craft. And if you are looking to speak more, then speak more. Go out and go talk and get on these shows, and there's plenty of them, so you can get your message out. I listened to earlier podcasts of myself as a guest and as a host. And it is really interesting, David, to see the transformation over time. And I will tell you, I've seen the videos of me speaking from the early days to today. It's the same thing. Practice makes perfect. Practice makes amazing. And I like to say that this is a great way for people to start. It's a good way to get your voice out.
Fantastic. So I'm going to ask you two final questions. Two.
You got it.
Second question. We're going to go backwards.
Okay.
Second question is going to be, how can people get connected and stay connected to your fabulous empire? The question I'm going to ask you before that, though, is if people were to take one thing from our conversation today, what would you really like that to be?
I'm going to go a little bit of a curveball of something they haven't said, but it'll be important. And that message will be the way that I sign off all my podcast shows, David. Be brief, be bright, be gone. Be brief. Recognize that time is one variable out there that a lot of people don't have a lot of. And while we think we sometimes need to say more, by saying less, you get that message more effectively. Listening more will help you with that. And being brief is being respectful of those that you're dealing with. So work on what you need to say and what that message is and get it down to something concise. Be bright. Be bright. The best, smartest people in the world are the best listeners. And one of the key skill sets in the Connecting Core is the ability to listen and really understand that the power of we, you and me, David, we could change the world. Lots of different clients with people and they connect. If you're bright and you think of smart solutions that incorporate your client and their needs and how you can help them, you will be incredibly effective. Now, be gone doesn't mean we're out of here and we're done right now. Be gone is an important piece because get on to the next thing. It's a part of what Thrive is all about, moving onward and upward. So when you're gone, that means you're shooting not just to the next topic, but you are moving to the next planet, to the next galaxy, to the next level. Get to that level and take these smart points and raise your game each and every day.
Wise words, my friend. Now, how can people get connected, stay connected, and continue to prosper from your wisdom?
Absolutely. You want to find anything about me, you want me to speak at your organization, you can go to loudiamond.net. Everything you've got about me is there, including links to the Thrive Loud podcast and my main website, thriveloud.com, which is where all of the business aspects of what Lou Diamond does is there. And in social media, everywhere, it is at Thrive Loud.
There it is, my friend. Well, this was totally fantastic. You are awesome. I appreciate it.
So are you.
I can't wait to have you back.
I can't wait to do the home and have you on because then I get to listen more because you got to listen more. And you know, I love to listen. So truly an honor and a pleasure to be on your program. I love the fact that we connected and we will continue to grow this relationship. My new brother from another mother.
We're a living laboratory, bro.
The Petri dish.
Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.